Excellent build quality, Acoustic Surface, Audio Plus, the important HDR formats all supported, along with Atmos sound and DTS digital audio, IMAX enhanced, BRAVIA core streaming and the Cognitive XR processor. Sony are onto a winner with the A84L, right? Hello and welcome to another video on AV Forums. I'm Phil Hinton, the site editor, and I'm a fully trained and qualified ISF and THX calibrator with 20 years of experience. In this video, we're taking a look at the Sony A84L OLED TV. The A84L and A80L are identical TVs with different SKUs due to retailer exclusives in the UK, and it's available in 55, 65, 77 and 83-inch screen sizes. We're reviewing the 65-inch A84L, but the image quality should be similar across all the screen sizes. The Sony is a mid-level OLED TV for 2023 and is almost identical to the outgoing A80K model that we reviewed late last year. It features a WRGB panel without a heatsink, and it uses XR OLED Contrast Pro algorithm to create extra brightness where it's needed by using a sensor with the Cognitive Processor XR, which detects screen temperature and then precisely controls the amount of light given. This approach improves the perceived contrast and dynamic range with HDR content, and this is important as the A84L has the least amount of peak brightness and full screen APL of any of the 2023 OLED screens at this market position. We go into the picture quality measurements in detail within the written review on AV Forums, so head over there to read the full details of the out-of-the-box and calibrated results. We fully measured and tested the out-of-the-box settings as well as calibrating the A84L and put it through some rigorous testing, which included side-by-side comparisons with its closest rivals. The Sony A84L measures in at 623 nits on a 10% industry standard window and 133 nits on a 100% white window in the most accurate custom HDR picture preset. This is a jump up from the A80K from last year, but it's still well below competing OLED TV sets that use a similar panel. The always-on dynamic tone mapping will assist the Sony to look dynamic with HDR10 content, but it still lacks the overall APL achieved by the new LG C3 and Philips OLED 807 sets, for example. With PQ EOTF tracking to ST2084, the A84L uses just one map for 1000 and 4000 master display metadata signals, which follows the standard to around 300 nits, where it then gently rolls off and hard clips at the peak brightness limit. The wide colour gamut performance is also very good on the A84L, and once again it looks very similar to last year's A80K. Tracking points are close to where they should be for saturation, and gamut size is very good indeed, providing an excellent performance for HDR content. We measured BT 2020 at 72% XY and 78% UV, with P3 coming in at 97% XY and 99% UV. When looking at a 5% slide, the screen uniformity of the A84L had minimal vertical banding seen. This was only visible in a dark room with the test pattern. It was never seen with actual TV or film content, even when viewing in a dark room with a very dark scene on the screen. At other brightness levels, there's no sign of dirty screen effect DSA, and there was also no vignetting to the panel edges, and viewing angles were also very good with no obvious colour shift. Black levels are also very good, as you would expect from an OLED panel, with very good just above black detail retrieval that helps with some image depth. Blacks are deep and fluid with stunning dynamic range once you add some brighter objects into the frame, and midtones are also superb in SDR as well as HDR content. Video processing is a Sony stronghold, and that's certainly the case here with the A84L. Upscaling was superb with no obvious artifacts, ringing to edges or junk pixels. With reality creation turned off, image sharpness was also very good with plenty of detail retrieval from high quality 4K sources and upscaled HD content. Motion is also superb with correct 5.5 pull down applied to 24 frames per second material with motion flow switched off. And if you see judder from OLED due to its near instant pixel response time, you can also add motion flow custom smoothness to 1, which will add slight interpolation, which gets around the issues for those who see it. This works really well and it doesn't add any noticeable SOE or soap opera effect. For 24 frames per second content, film mode needs to be set to high, and for 50Hz broadcast content, you might want to set it to low to avoid frame dropping with some fast moving content. The Sony applies settings per source input, so you can set these for the source and then forget about them. Overall, motion reproduction on the Sony is excellent. Out of the box, the Sony does have a cyan tint to its content, which is noticeable even when it's not compared to another TV set. SDR images do look cinematic with superb motion and bags of detail on offer. Skin tones look lifelike and believable, with colour looking natural, and blacks are strong, yet shadow detail is also very good without being forced. HDR is more of a mixed bag, especially when comparing it to the competition at this price point using a similar panel. While the image looks dynamic and wide colour is also very good, there is a lack of pop from the Sony, with specular highlights never quite looking bright enough and midtones that feel flat. Dolby Vision and HDR10 images in isolation are impressive, with motion and detail obviously being strong points here for the Sony. 4000 nit content in particular feels like it's displayed back slightly dimmer than it should be, as the Sony tries to preserve peak details over image APL, which does tend to make things look flat and dark compared to rivals. Again, we go into the picture measurements and comparisons in much greater detail within the written review at AV Forums, for those of you who like to nitpick over the data. Acoustic Surface Audio Plus is an excellent feature seen on Sony's TV lineup over the last few years, with actuators behind the OLED panel which vibrate it to create the sound. On the A80L, A84L, this uses left, centre and right actuators along with two bass units to create a 3.2 audio system. Sound quality is excellent for everyday movie and TV viewing at moderate listening levels within a normal living room. Having the sound come directly from the actor's mouth on screen certainly gives a great deal of realism to the sound quality, but if it's pushed loud, it does tend to get brittle and harsh. But at normal levels, it works really well, even if the bass is a little bit lacking overall. The Sony A84L is a reasonably good gaming TV with two HDMI 2.1 48GB per second inputs that support VRR out of the box along with ALLM, and it also has a dedicated gaming mode with auto HDR tone mapping and auto genre picture mode. There is, however, no HDIG or Dolby Vision gaming at 4K 120, but you can switch off VRR and gaming Dolby Vision at 4K 60. Be aware that eARC uses one of the two HDMI 2.1 ports, so if you need that functionality, you'll then be down to just one HDMI 2.1 port. We measured gaming input lag at 16.3 milliseconds for a 4K 60 signal. Just like the A80K from last year, the BRAVIA A84L is a sleek and stylish TV with a no-nonsense minimalist design. The feet offer three different ways to mount the TV. You can either have them right at the end of the panel, you can have them slightly closer in for a smaller TV unit, or you can have them raised for use with a soundbar. Build quality, as you would expect, is excellent and the TV feels solid and very well put together. Like last year, the A84L uses Google TV for its OS and Smart TV system, and it works a charm. There's no slowdown or freezing and everything works as you would expect it to. The apps are well supported and feature 4K UHD HDR playback where it's available, with support for Dolby Atmos. Plus, there's the BRAVIA Core streaming service where you get 10 credits and 24 months of access with this TV set. We're about to show you some side-by-side comparison shots on video, but bear in mind that these are not representative of what I can see in person here right now. They are captured by a camera which has a restricted dynamic range. They're then edited and compressed and uploaded to YouTube, and then further compressed and changed by YouTube before you see them on your display, which is probably not calibrated, so it looks different again to what I see here in person. For this comparison, we set the A84L to custom mode out of the box, and the LG C3 was set to filmmaker mode. Due to the custom mode on the A84L tracking a slightly different white point to the industry standards, it pushes blue, which then causes the entire image to have a cyan tint. This is really noticeable when it's in comparison with accurate sets like the LG, and can make the Sony stand out for all the wrong reasons. The LG had a more accurate looking white point, skin tones and colours. Both offer very good video processing, with the LG really catching up to the Sony in this regard when looking at upscaling and motion. Once calibrated, both sets did look very similar, which is the entire point of calibrating to a standard, and the result here is that once you add in that the LG C3 has better connectivity for gaming, a more accurate out-of-the-box image quality, and brighter and more punchy HDR picture performance and video processing that now pushes the Sony, we'll have to say that the C3 would be our choice, and it will ultimately be cheaper in the next few months as Sony prices tend to stay a bit higher. Moving to a comparison with the Samsung S95B QD-OLED, we use this TV as the S90C and S95C models are yet to arrive with us here in the UK, but for all intents and purposes the S90C is almost identical to the S95B for picture performance, plus the S95B at this moment in time of this review in May 2023 is still plentiful and available on the market at a much lower price than the Sony. Again, the Sony was set to custom mode out of the box and the Samsung was set to filmmaker mode. The first thing that always stands out when comparing a WRGB OLED like the Sony to a QD-OLED like the Samsung is the difference in the look of white, with a cyan push on the Sony and a warmer magenta tint on the Samsung. We did find that against the Samsung, the cyan push of the Sony in custom mode was very noticeable indeed. The colours also looked washed out in comparison, with the Samsung looking more natural when it came to skin tones and a warmer tone to white like in the Matrix. The detail was more apparent on the Samsung, with the extra APL brightness and overall peak capabilities bringing out more depth within the image and making the Sony look very flat in comparison. Once calibrated, things were slightly better for the Sony, but again its conservative approach to HDR and its tone mapping didn't stand up well against the Samsung. The result goes to Samsung, with its image quality standing out in comparison to a very flat looking Sony. The A84L has better video processing and motion, and with more solid blacks because it's much better in ambient lighting, but all of that didn't really help an image that looked very flat and very blue out of the box. This final comparison is really a bit unfair. We jump to another segment in the market with the LG G3. It offers a heatsink and MLA technology, so it really shouldn't be compared to this TV at all. It should be compared to the Sony A95L when it finally comes to market later this year. But we had a G3 sat next to the Sony A84L, so why not just show you the difference? We set the Sony to custom mode and the LG G3 to filmmaker mode. As you can see, it really isn't a fair fight at all, and what's worse for the Sony is that it's so conservative with its peak brightness that it really shows here. Yes, the XR processing can tone map to make it look brighter than the numbers would suggest, but it really isn't a match for the G3 in any way, and again, it's probably a really unfair comparison, and certainly it doesn't impact on the scores awarded to the Sony in this case, because the interesting thing here is just seeing the leap forward with MLA compared to the A84L. Will Sony introduce an MLA WRGB panel to next year's A80 models? Probably not, but it really would be cool if they did. Now let's wrap this up. SDR content can look incredibly cinematic on the Sony A84L with superb lifelike skin tones and natural colours. Added to this is some of the best upscaling and motion in the business, making the Sony an excellent choice for SDR movie watching. Its more conservative approach to HDR images is a slight drawback in my opinion, and APL is certainly dimmer than the competition, but it does have a more relaxed ABL circuit and tone mapping which tries to retain as much specular and highlight detail as possible. The problem is it does this at the cost of image brightness. HDR10 and Dolby Vision high dynamic range images can look conservative when compared to the competition, but with very good tone mapping and dynamic range, the Sony in isolation provides very good HDR image quality. Depending on your use case, we would recommend adding the Sony to your demo list if you're looking for an OLED screen at this price point. You should also look out for the A80K model from last year, as this is essentially the same TV bar a few tiny upgrades, and it can be found for £1,700 for the comparative 65-inch screen size that we're reviewing here. Don't forget the full in-depth review at AV Forums goes into all of this in much more detail, so head over there and check it out. If you've enjoyed this review, then please do leave us a like, and if you want to see more TV reviews from AV Forums, including our thoughts on the 2023 flagship models, then please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.